Well, hey everybody, it's Dr. Sasheen. Thanks for tuning in to SYGD, the podcast. Divorce may be messy, but you don't have to be. In this, our second season, join me as I set fires to lies, half-truths, and distortions that come along the way with the divorce journey and inspire you, motivate you to move past them quickly to live your best life. So set your clocks and your calendars and tune in each week. Welcome to Season 2, The Doctor is In. Well, hello, and welcome back, everybody. It's Dr. Sasheen. So, what are we talking about today? Today, we are talking about how relationships can be so toxic from the outside and how people from the outside don't understand how someone they hold in high esteem or hold in high regard can possibly have been in that relationship. In hindsight, we think everything is so clear, right? Because we're on the outside looking in. But in a relationship, especially one with a toxic person who is toxic and narcissistic, there are many things that happen. But one of the things that happens is this overwhelming kind of push to be loved onto a person that literally breaks through their walls and their defenses. And then before you know it, that person is in a toxic relationship that they never saw coming. We see it happen in celebrities a lot. People are often like, well, how could this person end up with that person? This person is so toxic. But what we don't see is the grooming process that takes place that leads to these kinds of relationships. And we only see the aftermath and not the beginning. So that's what we're going to talk about today, the concept of love bombing and narcissism, and why more people are victim to it than we realize, and why you might have also fallen into a relationship, looked around and said, how on earth did I get here? How did this happen to me? I'm smarter than this, without realizing that there are ways that people are using love to, in fact, get to you so that they can hurt you in the process. And we'll start this conversation after a word from our sponsor. Hey everybody, it's Dr. Sasheen from So You're Getting Divorced? The podcast, here to talk to you about Anchor and the ease at which you too can launch and start your own podcast. If you haven't heard about Anchor, let me just break it down for you. Here is the 411. Number one, it's free. This is a great way to get started if you've never done podcasting, or if you're a pro and you really like the idea of using your phone or your computer to get your podcast going without all the hassle, because number two, they will distribute it for you to places like Pocket Casts, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. That's a pretty sweet deal. Next, you can make money while you're doing your podcast with no minimum listenership, and that's pretty darn spectacular. So, follow these instructions. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Now, let's get back to the show. All right, so we're back. This is a really tough topic because it's one of those topics where people are inherently on the defensive and they get triggered, which is a word we use a lot these days. But it's a topic that needs to be talked about, which is there is a healthy need to be loved, right? There's a healthy desire to be loved and cared for and kind of surrounded with someone or by someone who believes in you and who has your best interest at heart, who thinks the sun and moon rise and set in your eyes. That's addictive and it's wonderful and it's a great feeling, and it's one that I don't think anyone should not want to feel. The problem starts when that kind of loving adoration is being given by someone who behind the eyes is actually incapable of being truly in love with you and sees a conquest instead of a companion. So I wrote this book called The 4 Faces of Narcissism, which I highly recommend that you pick up and check out. It's a really short read, but in it I talk about these 4 kind of narcissistic people out there. And one of the common traits is that they really understand the pathology of loving someone and how to use that to their advantage. We see this a lot in cult leaders. We see this I'm not trying to bash religion, but we see this a lot in religious organizations. We see this a lot in the grooming of sex offenders. And what we understand from those instances, because they're so egregious, we understand how the manipulation works. But what we don't always understand is how it works when it's happening to us. We don't always understand how it works when we find ourselves in relationships that inherently we understand there's something wrong with it, and we know we probably need to get out of it, but we can't quite figure out how we got here. And now we're in it, and we don't know what to do. There are a lot of times that people will be on social media talking about their relationships. And I'm going to talk about that in the next episode, why we need to quit talking so much about our relationships on social media. But there are many times where I see people talking about their relationships, asking legitimate questions about what is on the face of it an extraordinarily toxic relationship. And from the outside, everyone is saying, how can you not see this? And it's because people forget the grooming process that takes place in a relationship, especially a toxic relationship. It never starts out toxic, right? That when people come at us and enter into our lives with the intention of having a romantic relationship with us or some kind of loving relationship with us, rarely do they start off manipulating us. Rarely do they start off trying to control us. Rarely do they start off trying to undermine and demean us. Of course not. They start off being exactly what they think we need them to be. And one of the things I talk about in the book is how, a good narcissist, for lack of a better term, understands their target. They understand the ways in which their targets need to be loved. They understand at a very clear, almost intuitive level, the things that are necessary to get behind the defenses of their target. And when you think about it, that's really the only way that so many people allow themselves, and I use allow very loosely here, to be pulled into a toxic relationship. Number one, it doesn't start out toxic. The loving and caring and adoring, putting up on the pedestal, being your best friend, being your confidant, all of those things are completely normal, right? They're the things that we would expect to happen in the beginning stages of a courtship, whether that's actually a romantic courtship or a friendly courtship. It's all about courting when you're trying to break into a new relationship with someone, but we'll keep it with romance right now. But that kind of adoring you for who you are is heady. It's intoxicating. It should feel good, and it does feel good. And that overly solicitous behavior towards you that gets you to go, oh my gosh, this person's really into me. They're really accepting. They make me feel really special, and they're really excited to hear from me. They're really excited to be around me. That kind of relationship or that kind of behavior is normal. And the love of that kind of behavior that we feel when it's coming towards us is also normal. Of course, we love to feel that. It feels good. And inherently, most people understand that behavior, that overarching adoration, that wonderfulness, as a relationship progresses, it's going to ebb and flow. And it'll be up and down. There'll be times when it's not as adoring and we're not treated necessarily as wonderful. But the key here to remember is, in a healthy relationship, that is an ebb and a flow. Not everybody can be, continually placing you on a pedestal 24/7. But in the times where the ebb is going on, into that vacuum isn't toxic behavior. And that's really what starts to separate good love bombing, that kind of good feeling of adoration and purpose and love that we give to someone, with manipulation and toxic intent. Because when you start looking at narcissistic relationships, and we see this play out a lot, what you start to see is the water dripping on stone effect. So it starts out with all this adoration, and that's wonderful, but then the slight criticisms start, and you don't necessarily think about it as it's happening, because if it's happening in a way that is calculated and manipulated, it's love, 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 criticize, love, 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 criticize, love, 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 criticize. And then slowly it becomes love, love, criticize, criticize, love, love, criticize, criticize, love, love, criticize, criticize. And then it's love, criticize, 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 love, 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 criticize. The pattern is such that it starts to change. And by the time you realize the change, you're sucked into the pattern. You're sucked into the cycle. This is how intelligent, articulate, beautiful, strong, loving, caring, vivacious, amazing women and men are pulled into the toxic, manipulative, controlling, abusive narcissist's world. That's how it happens. It's the water dripping on stone effect. And before someone comes at me and says, well, people who are really on their game won't be sucked into that. You can't show me a person out there. I would argue you to the ground. You cannot show me a person out there who is so self-aware and so self-assured and so always on their game that they don't feel flattered when someone doesn't love them, that they don't feel a little tingle up their spine when someone doesn't absolutely adore them and think that the moon and sun rise and set in their eyes and think that they walk on water. You can't show me a human being on the planet that doesn't evoke a feeling in them of yearning to have more of that. And if you can show me that person, I will show you the narcissist that you're dealing with. Because human nature is communal. It craves community. It craves closeness and connection. Even people who will argue with me that, well, not all people like to be touched. This is not about touchy-feely. This is about a human instinct to connect. Even the most solitary person likes to be walking down the street. You know why? Because we like the feel of humanity, even if we're not engaging in humanity. It's the same that happens in love. We like the feeling of love, even if we're not necessarily looking for relationships, even if we're not necessarily wanting that person who's showing us the love. It still feels good when someone is loving on us in a way that makes us feel loved. And so the reality is, once you start looking at it from the perspective that everybody has the desire to be loved in them, and for some people that desire is played upon by others who have a desire to hurt, then you can start to see how people get into toxic relationships and why people stay in toxic and narcissistic relationships. Now, I'm not going to take away anyone's agency in this conversation. But what I am going to do is say that agency doesn't preclude you from being sucked into this cycle. It doesn't preclude you from falling into the narcissistic trap of love, 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 criticize, criticize, love, 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 criticize, criticize. And it takes a strong commitment by the couple to get out of the trap that this gets you into. And if you're dealing with a narcissist, chances are you're going to be struggling on your own because they don't care anyway. So, toxic reality. The toxic reality of love bombing gets people to a place where they accept a lot of things that begin to spill out into their public life, right? Like, this is when we really start to see the celebrity relationships around us, when they really start to break down and we begin to hear the rumors, and everyone reads the magazines and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe that she's stuck with him, or oh my God, I can't believe that he loves her, she treats her so badly. All this kind of stuff starts to happen. And we're like, how did this, amazing person end up with this person over here? Or how does she love him? You see it and you hear it all the time, the relationships of toxic men in Hollywood are legendary. And yet we somehow focus on how could she, the women who are in those relationships with those legendarily toxic men, how could she have been? We don't focus on the grooming and the love bombing that these toxic individuals have used over the course of time to get those women into those relationships. The over the top just amazingness that they feel. And you hear it in the stories of the women when they start to come out and talk about the toxicity and talk about the relationship. And the one of the prevailing narratives always is, he was so different when we first met. He was so charming and supportive and so there for me. And when I needed him, he was my rock. And when he was my cheerleader, the first person to call me and say, congratulations or good job. And you don't see the criticisms that begin to start behind the scenes. All we see, and this happens whether you're a celebrity or not, all we see is the aftermath. The woman who is a little less confident in public, the woman who's a little less forthcoming about her relationship, who's a little more guarded about her relationship, who used to be more open but is now a lot less forthcoming. And we see this wall kind of be formed against the reality. So people who are in a toxic relationship with someone tend to start to form a wall against the outside world because they have no choice. Because it's a foolish assumption to believe that all people in a toxic relationship are suffering from Stockholm syndrome, that they are, in love with their oppressor. But a lot of them are. And so there's a wall that forms that says, I have to deal with the fact that this person loves me. This love is now toxic. It's dangerous. It's debilitating. It's degrading. But I still get a glimpse of what was the love that I fell in love with on enough of an occasion to feel like I can't leave, to feel like I can't go anywhere, to feel like if I leave, then maybe all of what I've worked so hard for, what I've invested so much time, effort, and energy in, will prove to be my undoing. And that fear that everything that you've worked so hard, you've invested so much in this person, and even though you're now in what is arguably one of the most toxic relationships that you'll ever have in your entire life, and you need to get out, but now you can't because you've invested so much time, effort, and energy into this person, and you've endured so much. The love bombing has become, almost hate bombing at you, but it doesn't matter because you have just invested so much time, effort, and energy. Where will you go? How will you recover? What will you do? And that keeps a lot of people right where they are for many, many years, sometimes until death does them part. Because the process of breaking someone down and getting them trained and programmed to accept hate as opposed to love, but calling it love, is a process that happens over time. And it's a process that both parties become addicted to. And until you understand that it's addiction and you take the necessary steps to walk out of it, there's just no way to get out of it. We see this happen when relationships break up and all of a sudden the people start talking about how toxic it was, about how controlling he turned out to. One of my, I remember when I was in grad school, and there are a couple of artists I really used to like a lot until, word of their relational habits broke, and you would hear stories of just raging control freaks who dated young women and started out wonderful and beautiful, and in the end became just these narcissistic devils, for lack of a better word, who just broke them down, destroyed careers. I mean, Harvey Weinstein is a huge example. Woody Allen is being talked about right now, but he's done it over the years. But there are a lot of celebrities, especially men, who are in positions of authority, who use the love bomb, especially because of the position that they are in, to adore and love and find a way to gain control over women, and in doing so effectively prevent them from living the life to their fullest potential. And we see that in a lot of the men that I just mentioned, but that happens a lot in places like higher education, where professors can be very much this type of individual looking to gain control and manipulate up and coming academics. And I speak from the world of academics because that was my world for 15 years. So I'm not speaking it from out of turn. I'll put it like that. But the key here to why it seems like the relationships that we look at and we're like, why don't they just leave? The key here to understand is that love bombing is addictive to the person being love bombed on. Like, again, if you are made to feel so special and so wonderful and so amazing, your personality cannot withstand the onslaught of that. Now, for some people, it's like, yeah, this is a bit over the top and I don't really like that, and they walk away. But for the majority of people, that's not how they're hardwired. Even the most reluctant person, and we see this play out in movies, right? People are like, well, if you just, don't take the first no, continue to come at her. We see this play out as some kind of grand victory. But that also sends a message to the person on the receiving end. Like, if this person's really doing all this, like, thinks this highly of you, how can you not want to say yes and be a part of their life. Like they care about you so much. They adore you so much. They're so excited about you. They're so into you. How can you not want this person? Well, there was a meme going around on, I think it was Instagram, where a young man decided to propose to this young lady, and it looked like in the middle of a mall. And he got down on one knee with his flowers and a ring, and she's trying to pull him up and he won't get up. And she runs away from him. She runs away and out of the frame. And some of the comments were so interesting to me because a lot of the prevailing comments from men and women were like, oh my God, I can't believe she was so mean. She could have done that behind the scenes. That's so embarrassing. Obviously she's never going to be happy if that's how you would treat someone, and so many things. And my thought was, what kind of manipulative aspect of your life do you have to be in to think that you can force someone into a yes by proposing in front of a bunch of strangers in the middle of a mall? So where some people see this as this grand romantic gesture and, oh my gosh, he must have put so much effort and energy into it. What I saw was there is nothing about this that is romantic. This is a highly manipulated situation designed to force a response from someone who may have already said, I'm not ready. I don't want this yet. I'm not ready for this. Or who they may never have had a conversation yet about marriage or the future, or who may not be into this person, and this person may be trying to force the issue by putting this person on the spot. And I think it takes a fair amount of courage to just walk away, knowing full well that people are probably going to, harass and harangue and degrade her for running away from this beautiful romantic moment. Now, I think that's a little different than the kind of videos that we see where people are in their homes around their friends or playing games. There appears to be a kind of loving relationship, or at least there has been some kind of conversation about this. And, there's this big public proposal, and the person says yes. Usually the person knows this is coming at some point, even if they don't know exactly where it's coming from. But I think it's interesting that people get really offended if the person being proposed to doesn't act a certain way. But the reality is that some of the most important things that happen, I do not have the rights to this music that's playing in the background, by the way, but some of the most important things that happen when that public proposal takes place is that the agency of the person being proposed to is taken away from them. The expectation is that they're going to say yes. And that is a form of control. That is a form of manipulation of trying to move someone into a yes that they may not agree with. And that's part of that narrative of toxicity that can lead to a bad relationship. Because when you're put on the spot to say yes, it's very hard to back out, to not then plan a wedding. I can remember when Oprah Winfrey got engaged, because the whole world was talking about it. And then quietly, she just didn't get married, and the whole world also talked about that. But I finally got to hear her tell the story of what transpired and how they were going to get married, and then they just didn't. And life just kind of kept right on moving on for them, and they kept on having a great relationship and living their best life and doing their own thing and having the kind of relationship that worked for them. And the one thing I really respect about Oprah Winfrey and Stedman Graham is that their relationship doesn't play out in social media. It never has. There are very few glimpses behind that curtain. And so even though we have some idea of the care and affection that they have for each other, because we've seen them on the public stage, we don't have the drama. We don't know the drama. We don't know how things happen behind the scenes. We don't know where their arguments are, or their places of tenderness, or their places of pain. Like, we don't have that insight into their world. The most public this aspect of their relationship was the engagement. It was very public. It was extraordinarily, it was big news. And then it was kind of like the ring disappeared, and she just stopped talking about it. And the speculation didn't prompt her to give an explanation. And that, my friends, is what I consider one of the healthiest examples of agency in a relationship, where both people don't have to explain the inner workings of their relationship, but you can see that the parties themselves seem to just be going on with their life in the fullness of their being whole, happy, and healthy together, but in the fullness of their being as individuals and as couples without a needed explanation for why they're doing what they're doing. It really broke my heart when Jada Pinkett Smith and Will Smith had to sit down at the red table and talk about the entanglement. And one of the reasons that hurt my heart is because it was so public. And I understand that they're public figures and that public figures are sometimes called to make an account of their behavior. And I also understand that the gentleman in question made it public. And so therefore there was no choice but to answer with an account because their privacy was violated. And there are a lot of people who are going to push back and say, the morality of having an extramarital affair or whatever, with this person and all this kind of stuff, that's actually none of our business. But what I will say is this: to have to sit down and then discuss the inner workings of their relationship was very revealing, number one. And number two, the fact of the matter is that the way in which the Smiths have navigated their relationship up to this point has been very similar to the way that Oprah Winfrey and Stedman Graham had navigated their relationship. It's very private. Their life on camera is their life on camera, but their family life, their family dynamic, their family situation is very private. They don't bring the world into their family life. We don't know their pain point. We didn't know their pain points. We got to share in some of their joys, but in some of their public sorrows, but we don't know their pain points. And how does all this relate to love bombing? I'll get back to that. I'm digressing here for a second. But as I was saying, what hurt me about that red table talk that Jada and Will had to do was the fact that they weren't able to process the rawness of betrayal because they were couched as the perpetrators in a crime against this other person, and not as three consenting adults who had a relationship or had an understanding or had something happening within the confines of their marriage that was actually nobody's business but the people who were inside the confines of their marriage, period. Now, there is a pathology to control, right? There is a pathology to people who need to either control or be controlled. And when you have an extramarital affair, one of the things that you have to understand is you can't really control the other person. And if they get their feelings hurt, they may choose to publicly bring the world into their hurt, which by extension brings the world into your relationship. That's one of the drawbacks of having an extramarital relationship, if that is a problem that you are dealing with. I don't know if Will and Jada have an open marriage or not, and I don't actually care if they do or don't. Whatever works for them has been working for them for I don't know how many years. But what I will say is this: I want to see more agency given to people to have happy, healthy relationships in a way that everyone is achieving their highest and best good. And so how this relates back to toxic narcissistic relationships, what we seem to glorify, people were ready to pounce on Jada, and they were pouncing hard on her. But what didn't happen? They didn't get a divorce. And if they're getting divorced, we don't know about it. What didn't happen? They're still not talking about their personal life, their pain points. They've moved on. They've moved on. But what is constantly making news is the possibility of what could happen painfully in relationships. And that's because for as much as people love, they love trauma. They love seeing trauma play out. And it's debilitating to relationships that are actually traumatic to watch so many people glorify trauma as if it's just the way relationships should go. And when someone makes a decision to stop the trauma, Oprah Winfrey not getting married, Jada Pinkett Smith discussing her entanglement, but them now shutting the door on that and not looking back. Megan the Stallion, whom I love, choosing to stand up and stand in her power and not be allowed not allow that person who shot her, whose name I will not mention, that person who shot her to steal her joy and thunder at who she is and what she's about. When celebrities choose to acknowledge something happened but reclaim their agency, they get vilified. They get ripped apart and talked about and made to be the Svengali of the drama, when in fact all they've done is say you don't have the right person who did this thing to our relationship, or whether that person is the fans, the media, or the other person. You don't have the right to take my life and turn it into a freak show or a sideshow for your consumption and your amusement. I'm taking my agency back. We get really mad at celebrities for taking their agency back and for saying this is actually none of your business. This is hard for regular old people to watch because this happens on a celebrity level. It also happens on a much more mundane, everyday level to people who no one knows their names. When you've gotten into a toxic relationship with a narcissist and you're trying to get out and you're looking for a way out, and all people have seen is that loving, wonderful, loving, love bombing behavior at the beginning, and that shows up every time you're in public, and they see none of the back stuff, none of the behind the scenes stuff. When you decide to reclaim your agency and take back your narrative and do something that shuts the door, and whether that's walking away, getting a divorce, stop, whatever the case may be, when you decide to stop that relationship, it becomes hard for people to separate out what they see as your reality versus what you say is your reality. And they're more likely to revisit that trauma on you over and over again and ask you to relive it because they don't understand how you could be loved and adored by this person. How could you walk away from this person? They adore you. How could you not want this person in your life? They've been fantastic to you. They've invested 15 years in you. They've done this, they've done that. How can you? And those people don't understand how that pressure keeps a lot of people in toxic and narcissistic relationships a whole lot longer than they should be. A whole lot longer than they should be. And so when we see the relationship fall apart and we hear the stories behind the scenes, we want to say, oh, well, I always knew something wrong. No, you didn't. People in hindsight always know something is wrong, but they really don't. They really have no clue. But what they don't do is stop looking for the next traumatic event to keep them. So to keep their appetite for trauma satiated. So all that to say, when it comes to narcissistic relationships and toxic narcissism and love bombing, because they're all kind of connected and tied together, it is really easy for people who are fabulous, wonderful, on their game, top of their game, beautiful, wealthy or not wealthy, but who have great agency, to get pulled in by someone who loves them, adores them, thinks they are amazing, worships the ground that they walk on, thinks the sun and moon rise and set in their eyes. That is a feeling that is addictive. And unless you have an aversion to addiction, you can easily find yourself in a kind of relationship that starts with love bombing, but ends with hate, with literally you hating yourself and the person you're with hating you on a daily basis. And so, when I'm talking to people, and I used to work with clients one-on-one, but when I would talk to them about chasing that dragon of love, it's like chasing any kind of dragon, right? And for people who have been in an addictive world, chasing the dragon can be chasing anything, but chasing that dragon of love is just as addictive, really wanting, needing that feeling that was there before. Always chasing that feeling that was there before. If I can just hang in there long enough, the cycle will come back around to where I'm getting that love bomb and not all of this other stuff. So if I just hang in there, it'll come back. And unfortunately, ride or die sometimes means that you're going to die a lot faster than someone's going to ride to your rescue, because the person that you're riding for is not going to rescue you. They're the person that's actually doing the thing to you that's breaking you down. So I'm going to end this. This one's short, but I wanted to talk about this. But I'm going to end this with one of the, sorry, I don't know if that keeps going off. I'll edit that out. With the Cardi B Offset which is going to be one of those relationships that plays out a lot in the public. And that's, for good or for ill, that's just the kind of life that they lead. But, it's interesting to watch the love bombing that happens. And we, she gets put down and criticized a lot. And, Jay-Z and Beyonce also fall into this a little bit, but they've done the same thing as Oprah and Stedman and Will and Jada, in that they have a wall between their personal life and the way that we get to talk about it. And though we do understand and we do have a glimpse behind the scenes, especially with the album release of Lemonade and kind of some of the other things that have come out, but that wall is pretty thick. But we've heard some of the narcissistic behavior and things that have come out of their relationship. But again, they're not opening that door to people. They're not opening that door to anyone. But back to Cardi B and Offset. We don't know ultimately what has prompted them to get back together. But what we do know is what she has said, which is when she filed for divorce, was something so telling, and I really respect her for that. She said, "Why would I wait for something to happen that has consistently happened before? Why do I need to wait for it to get bad again?" Hear me out there, please. Why do I need to wait for it to get bad again when it's already been bad? It's not bad now, but I've done what I need to do here. Now, they're not getting divorced at the moment, but I would wonder what took place or what's taking place within the confines of their conversations and in their relationship to either continue fostering the idea that they're working it out, or if it's just more of a, love is addictive, and a certain kind of love, toxic love, is extraordinarily addictive, just like any drug. I'm not saying that that's the case, not saying that at all. So please don't at me about Cardi B. I love Cardi B, think she's amazing, support her 100%. And again, totally respect her decisions about her personal life. I'm just saying that her statement was very telling, and it's one that I really respect a lot, and I wish a lot more women listened to. Because as she said, I don't need to wait for him to cheat again to know he's going to cheat again. I can move on now and save myself the heartache of being hurt later. God, that was powerful. That was powerful. And it took a really strong moment to be able to say that and to act on it. And for whatever reason that they didn't get divorced, I'm sure that'll come out, or maybe it won't. But in that moment, we got a glimpse into what it looks like to have the agency taken back from a toxic relationship and to say, I'm actually not going to do this. And I would say the same thing goes for Beyonce, who could have hidden Jay-Z's multiple affairs, who could have continued making music as if nothing happened, but instead chose to take her own agency back and say, you all don't get to define this narrative for how I'm going to get through this moment. I am going to define this narrative, and I'm going to do the things that I feel is necessary, because why would I wait for you to tell the world my story when I can write a whole damn album and tell it myself? And she did. That's it for today. I really, thanks for letting me kind of meander through this. It's one of those hard topics to talk about, but pick up Four Faces of Narcissism, give it a read. You will find in there some nuggets if you are dealing with a toxic relationship and how you may not be recognizing the signs of it. But one of the things that I've been really stressing today about the love bomb, that is the fourth level of narcissism called the thief. Those people, they can get to you in ways that you may not even realize they're doing. That's it for today. I will be back soon. Take care. And that, as they say, is the tea. Thanks for tuning in this week. To get more, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, LinkedIn, and coming soon, Patreon, for those who want to subscribe and who want to support this podcast. If you have any questions, please contact me at support@sasheenmobley.com. And as always, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment so that we can continue to rise in the rankings. That's it for this week. Take care. See you next time. Bye.